Blessed are those who have not seen and have believed. Over the last few weeks, while I was praying with these readings, the news cycle became increasingly violent. Two mass shootings, the dismissal to bless those who love one another, weather patterns that are wreaking havoc. And I kept thinking, we are a nation of Thomases, a people who question and doubt and panic when it gets hard. Humans. When things get rough and when a bad thing happens, it is our human nature to think that bad luck is on our side or that God has forsaken us and that we are alone. But the readings this week call us to remember a few important things about our faith as Christians, as Easter people who believe in the risen Christ. The first reading calls us to remember that we are a community of believers of one heart and one mind. Whoa, that's a big ask. To be of one heart and one mind with those who may think hurtful things about me or my brothers and sisters. To be of one heart and one mind with those who do harm. The reading in Acts tells us that this community of believers also lived in a way in which they shared everything without greed, and that everyone always had everything that they needed. This past year, we saw a lot of people come together in times of need, but we also saw that our own fears and doubts can lead us to be greedy and to covet the things that others in our community may need more than we do. There was no needy person among them, it says. Can we imagine how this pandemic could have been if there was no needy person among us? If we truly lived in a way so that goods were distributed each according to their own need? The second reading tells us that we show God our love for God by keeping the commandments. There's a sneaky line in there too. And God's commandments are not burdensome. Again, our reaction as humans, as doubters and questioners, is to say, hold on. Some of those commandments are hard. Not to be jealous, not to be greedy, not to lie. And the big important one, to love one another as Jesus loved us. To love one another. To stop fighting. To love one another. To allow others to love one another, to stop hating others for their differences from me, to love one another, to cease bigotry, exclusion, and violence. It is hard to believe in a love that strong when we look around us and see devastation and destruction, when we see hurt and despair and sickness. And sometimes we are Thomas. We have trouble believing and feeling that love when we can't see it. The reality is that most of us, in this current community of believers, are sometimes Thomases. And sometimes we are the other disciples in the room, pulling the Thomases along, holding them up, convincing them that God's love is real and strong, that Jesus is risen. But we are all Thomases because we too have to look a little bit harder to see the risen Jesus. We weren't there when he came to the upper room for the first time. The psalm this week uses beautiful imagery and metaphors to tell us about God's strength. I was hard pressed and I was falling, but the Lord helped me. My strength and my courage is the Lord, and God has been my Savior. It is easy to be Thomas, to doubt and question when the answer isn't directly in front of us. And it is beautiful that the post-Easter scriptures give us those narratives too, that we, thousands of years later, might see ourselves in another disciple who, even days after Jesus died, was one of the closest to him, had trouble believing and keeping the faith. It isn't a weakness to doubt like Thomas. But then we have to ask the question, where do I see and feel the love of God? How can I love as Jesus loved? That commandment doesn't feel like a burden, but like freedom. The freedom to love without cost, without boundaries, without hate, to not always see and still believe that this love is possible.